we'll jump right into it. US FDA OTC Monograph regulations. And actually, before I jump into it, I want to take some time to go over some of the definitions that you're going to hear a lot of during today's call. So first and foremost, the OTC Monograph drug. This is a non-prescription over-the-counter drug that might be marketed without an approved drug application under Section 505 of the FD&C Act. If it meets the requirement of Section 505G of the FD&C Act, as well as other applicable requirements. And then you're also going to be hearing Gary and I using the term OTC monograph. This is a rule book for each therapeutic category establishing conditions such as the active ingredients, the indications, doses, route of administration, labeling, and testing, which an OTC drug is generally recognized for as safe and effective. And my first question for Gary, Gary, can you give us a bit of information about what drugs are affected by these new regulations?
Yeah, sure. We'll go into a quick focus on human OTC monograph drugs. So these particular drug listings have an SPL document type that it's equal to the human OTC drug label. Not in scope for this discussion are pretty much everything else. So all the drug products. So we're talking now about human prescription drugs, not applicable, biologics and blood products, not applicable. All those veterinary products that are under the animal drug banner, not in scope. So we're focused, Caitlin, really just on these human OTC drug products in this discussion today.
Okay, great. And then can you give me a bit of information on what is the FDA regulatory framework requiring this OTC monograph change?
Well, we have to do a little bit of a history lesson here and go back in time, Caitlin, to 2020 when the CARES Act, so that was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as CARES. So it wrote out a number of things, obviously, on the coronavirus. But included in that particular act, there was a section that made a change to the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. And that added Section 505G. And this is a particular section now in the act that basically reforms and modernizes the way OTC monographs are created, the way they're managed, the way they're changed. There was literally about a 50-year-old process under something called the OTC Drug Review that needed to work its way through various phases. There was 3 stages where it had to be met in various milestones. And there had to be some rulemaking attached to it. So there was regulations that were tied to this particular process. And you find all those references in the Code of Federal Regulations. So it was pretty slow to react. It was very burdensome. And I guess pretty much everyone, industry and the FDA, both wanted to streamline that process. So let's take a look at some of the things that are included in this revised approach. First of all, and this is probably the most important item, is that the FDA was given authority to issue something called an administrative order, and basically that is able to create or change a OTC drug monograph in the conditions around it, related to the generalized, recognized as safe and effective. So that is quite different. So the FDA is able to issue this administrative order, whereas before it used to go through a whole legal framework and get approved and then become part of the regulations. That's not true anymore. So that old system has been retired. We're now in this new system. There are provisions for industry to make requests for a new or change to a particular monograph. You might have heard of OMAR, stands for OTC Monograph Order Request. You do have to pay rather highly, by the way, for that request, but you do have the provision to do that. There's a next-gen portal website where you're able to make that request. And all of this did not happen for free. There was establishment of the OTC Monograph drug user fee. So if you're familiar with the prescription drug version of that, PDUFA, there's a medical device version of that, MDUFA, and there's a bunch of, of these floating around. Now we have the OTC Monograph user fee. So that places a fee, an annual fee on your OTC Monograph drug facility. So each year, now back in June, you should have already made this payment, a little bit over $26,000. My guess, if you look at all the other fees and the history, it'll probably go up next year. But so all this did not happen for free. Unfortunately, industry gets hit with a facility fee to help fund this particular activity and the new process at the FDA. Noteworthy is to understand that with administrative orders that come out, the FDA is now able to create something called monograph numbers. And we'll look into that a little bit more as we work our way through this session today. But referencing the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulation part number, and citing that particular item is no longer valid because that has evaporated. So that is going away, and now you make references to a monograph number, and that's the primary thrust of this particular conversation today. Now, in addition to that CARES Act that came out, the FDA has also provided a public website. You can go to OTC Monographs at FDA, and you can search all those monographs that have been created. You can do an analysis and take a look at proposed and final administrative orders. And you can also comment on those particular orders. So that's a really nice website. If you're not familiar with that, I highly recommend that for this audience, to make sure you go to that website, become familiar with the actual published monographs. I would imagine many of those in the audience, just roughly a month ago now, back in September, received an email from the FDA. So that stirred a lot of interest throughout industry. And basically that message was, starting with the fourth quarter of this year, so that's the annual renewal and certification period for drug products, the OTC drug products would need to make use of a new marketing category called OTC Monograph drug. And the citation to a CFR part number would now be obsolete. And now that application field, if you will, needs to point to a monograph number. So that did actually create a question. Well, what if I don't make that change today, or I don't need to make that change this year? Can I still point to some old existing OTC drug listings that have the old numbers, the old CFR number and so on, and point to that in my blanket no change certification? So there was a clarification that came out a little bit later that you can actually submit a blanket no change certification for this year, 2023, and have as part of that listing pointing to SPL's OTC listings that have the old terms and codes. It's our understanding that is only valid for this year. Now, if you need to make an update to a OTC drug product, as of October, the new rules are in place. So if you submit a listing in this fourth quarter, you will have to make use of the new terms pointing to the monographs. But we'll talk about the timing a little bit later here. But that's the bottom line from this email. The other thing that has happened is the SPL implementation guide has recently been revised. There's some revisions in place. The most recent one is in October 12, again, just now a few days ago, but it includes the instructions and validations for building SPL OTC listings based on these monograph numbers. So the information is there to build the SPLs if you need to exercise that.